Hello and assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Kashif Kamran, and the topic I'm discussing with you today is the possible ways in which risk question could be set in the question number one of the AAA exam paper. Now, we know since the article was published by the examining team in May 2023, that was prior to the June 23 exams, the examining team published an article which was about attempting the Section A question. And in this article, attempting the Section A question, the examining team guided us about the four possible ways in which future risk questions could be set in. There's just a change of way in which the question would be put in front of the student, and there is slight modification, and the student should be accustomed to that. One of that possible way even came in the June 2023 exams. So the students appearing for exams in 2023 and onwards, since this article has been published in, it's very critical that you read through this article firstly. I'll just be showing you that on the screen, and we'll be interrogating the four possible ways in which a risk question could set in, and the one which came in the June 23 exams. Okay, this is the article I am referring to. You can see this now in front of the screen. This is the article answering Section A question in the triple exam. And this was published a month before the June 23 exams. I even covered it for my regular students. So they have an advantage of knowing exactly how a question can come in on risk. And one of the way defined in this article was examined in the June 2023 exams. Now, if you read through this article, it's telling you about the whole question number one, which is set at 50 marks, and the background of it, and what else could be in the question number one beside risk. So you can just read that out on your own. I'm just getting down to the part of assessment of risk style. This is where I am looking at assessment of risk style. And this is where the examining team is telling us about the possible way in which the question could set in. One of them is the way it is being set in since September 22. So that can be, that can come again as well. So that is not changed in. So the first way in which a question could set in is here, number one, right here, Control C, and you take it back to the Word file I'm using for the session today. So possible ways in which question could be set in, possible ways in which a risk question could be set in the question number one for AAA paper since June 23 exams, right? So one of the possible way is the one given by the examiner. Let's copy paste that. Number one is this: evaluate and prioritize the significant risk of material misstatement. I even covered that in my previous video on the YouTube channel. How would you go about evaluating and prioritizing the significant risk? I've just done a video on this prior to this one, and you can watch it on my YouTube channel. This is the way we are looking at a question since September 22, right? So this is the most common way the question around audit risk and ROM is coming in since September 22 exam, since when the examiner started to use the terminology significant risk, and since when the examiner started to use the word prioritization in line with the revised ISA 315. So this is something which is being tested since September 22. So I'm not much worried about it. The number two type of question, if you just go back and copy that from the examiner, is here, number two. And examiner says in number two, this is how the question could be: A and B. A and B. And we just take it back to the Word file and we paste it under two. So this is examiner telling us how a question type two can be published. So this is the first type, and this is the second type. So it says in the question type 2, there would be a requirement A, and then there would be a requirement B for the question type 2. Just let me properly arrange it for you, and then we start discussing it like this. Okay. So in the question requirement type 2, which you can now see in front of your screen, the question would ask you, evaluate and prioritize, that's fine, line with September 22, the risk of material misstatements to be considered in developing the audit strategy and audit plan. That is just a term being added here, making it more line with ISA 300 and ISA 315, because eventually at the planning stage, you are doing planning. And we know there are two components of planning, audit plan and audit strategy. So just bringing that more formal terminologies to the paper, making it look more appropriate. So the answer plan would remain same. You are evaluating and prioritizing the risk of material misstatements to be considered in developing the audit plan and audit strategy. Again, when you're prioritizing, so you're prioritizing the significant risk, even though that word significant is missing from here, but this word prioritize means you're prioritizing the ones which are more important, prioritizing the ones which are significant. So that's quite similar to the question we have in September 22 exam onwards. Only the terminology changing here, developing the audit strategy and plan, that is just to bring it more in line with the international terminologies coming from ISA 300 and 315 revised, will not change the way you answer the question. So you're just focusing on prioritizing the risk, giving your conclusions on what is the basis of your prioritization as guided to you in the previous session. You are not required. So the examiner is saying for the question 2A that you're not required to consider the risk relating to goodwill. So while you are writing the risk for 2A, you will not consider goodwill in the list. So minus the goodwill, evaluate and prioritize the risk. So that means there is a specific risk in goodwill, but examiner don't want you to touch goodwill for the requirement 2A. And this is a question which came in June 23 exam. The word goodwill was replaced with the word inventory. So otherwise than that, the question was the same. So you're not required to consider risk relating to goodwill. Why? Because it has been discussed in the B requirement. Justify in the B requirement, justify why goodwill has been identified as a significant risk. So examiner is saying why goodwill is a significant risk. Can you just justify that? And you know how you justify a risk. You need to look into the case study for goodwill. Firstly, you get your first mark by telling that goodwill is significant because it's material to the financial statement. You look at the value given to you in the exam paper. Then you say it might be significant because of some estimations involved in it. There could be something very specific in the case study given by the examiner, which makes goodwill even more significant because of certain wrong accounting treatment being adopted, or because of the approach of the management not to impair goodwill, not to review goodwill for impairment every year. There could be something in the case study which make it significant beside materiality or any estimations into its impairment process. Every justification is 1 mark. So there could be 2, 3, 4, depending upon the case study. But from the case study, you just need to pick it out that what is so special about goodwill, making it a significant risk of material misstatement. And every justification would fetch you 1 mark each. And then design the procedures on goodwill. We know that it has a common phenomenon. Question number one, you do get audit procedures on an accounting area. So examiner is saying, can you just tell me some procedures on the valuation of goodwill? So that's not changing, but the structure of the question is 2A, 2B. In 2A, you're looking at the risk minus goodwill. So you will not bring goodwill in 2A. You will hold yourself. Then you come to 2B and you say, okay, why goodwill is important? Why goodwill is significant? Reason 1, reason 2, reason 3, reason 4. For example, 3 reasons, 3 marks, 4 reasons, 4 marks. And you come to the next one and you say, procedures on goodwill, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look at the number of marks, right? So this is how things came in. This requirement 2 was examined in June 23 exams replacing goodwill with inventory. Otherwise, in that, things were the same. So you might foresee same requirement coming into September 23, December 23, or you might get the typical one, the first one back in September 23 and December 23, because these are all possible ways in which a question could be set in. Okay, the third possible way in which a question could be set in, let's just copy that from the examiner article. Okay, the third is right here, justify, and here, just let's take it back. This has not yet come in. So there is a chance of that in either September 23 or December 23, if the examiner wants to put that in focus. So this is the third type of question now on your screen. And this third type of question tells us, justify. Again, that justification is important. Again, the justification has to be linked to the case study. You cannot have a rote learning of that justification. Why each of the following have been identified as significant risk. So rather than asking you a question, evaluate and prioritize the significant risk, which is a typical question we normally get. Look at this one, which is a broad spectrum question in which you find 5-6 risk as per the marking scheme, or asking you a question, evaluate and prioritize the risk minus goodwill and do goodwill in the B part. Examiner is just saying, these are the 3 risks in the scenario, or examiner might even give you A, B, C, D, E, depending upon the examiner. So examiner is saying these are 3 risks in the case study. That's something examiner has done good for you. So at least all the student will be knowing these 3 are risk. But why each of them has been identified as significant? So why each of the following has been identified as significant? So you need to give reasons, right? So each reason justifying is worth 1 mark. And probably one of that reason is materiality, the quantitative materiality, because it might be exceeding the threshold of materiality you must have set at the start of the briefing note. So that might be one reason. The other reasons could be case-specific estimations, something of a wrong approach of the management, wrong accounting treatment, any risk of management bias, anything, or something significantly increasing from the last year. So you need to investigate the case, exactly what's happening in each one of them, and you need to justify why. So when you say justify why, this is not a rote learning, but justify why could be materiality, significance, materiality. Would be significant. Number 2, it could be any case specific issue around the around ABC. Any specific wrong treatment by management. The management must have done some wrong accounting treatment, or the attitude of management that they are not willing to rectify the misstatement, or the attitude of the management around that specific accounting treatment. And they say, okay, what we have done is right and we're not listening to you as an auditor. So some sort of that thing, or any sort of estimations involved in it, or any sort of subjectivity coming into the ABC, which is, or any significant rise or fall in the above numbers from last year, because you will be shown the values as well. So you can just relate the increase and decrease in value. This will be good for you, right? This will demonstrate your judgment, right? This will give you extra marks for analysis. So you will get extra marks for analysis if you find the increase and decrease and justify that. So do try to do that, right? Because that will really impress the examiner, that you try to find that rise and fall even to link with any significance, estimations, any specific thing in the scenario, any specific wrong treatment by the management, materiality, or something being done for the first time in ABC, something for the first time in ABC. There could be possible reasons, right? Again, this is not a rote learn list, and the reason of writing is not to rote learn it. It's just about giving you some thought process, because sometimes even the students struggle with the thought process, which is very bad. But the bad thing is that you give them something on the screen and they'll say, okay, this is it. Then their thought process is like closed. So even that is bad. Either you don't think, or if someone tells you some suggestions, you think, okay, this suggestion is full and final. We're not even thinking beyond it. So I wrote this point here, I think, which is the more broad spectrum point, which should take the most effect in the exam paper. So justify why each of A, B, C is a significant risk, and you justify every justification under the heading of goodwill, under the heading of inventory, under the heading of non-current asset will give you 1 mark. So you look at the number of marks to see how many justifications you need to give for each one of them. Now, this is a style of question which has not yet been examined. So this is not yet examined up till June 23. So is there a possibility of that coming anywhere in September or December? You are clever enough to take that perspective. So this is the third one on your screen. So this is one question where you can think about how things could be for you. And the fourth question type is about the business risk, which has not changed in. So we know business risk also comes in and is quite potential for September 23 exams. And the simple style of question is evaluate the business risk to be considered in planning the group audit. So that's a pretty simple question. It has always been the same. So there's no change in the fourth question, which is to evaluate the business risk. Now, we know business risk never comes alone. So business risk will either have audit risk or ROM in the second part. So it could be possible that in the first part you have the business risk, and in the second part you had this 3, something like this, because business risk never come alone, right? So the business risk requirement could be backed by a question like number 3 here, could be backed by the question 2 here, or could be backed by the question 1 here. So it's quite possible, right? But these are 4 possible ways which the examining team is trying to spell in. The first one, again, is the most common one, and it's there since September 22 when the changes came in. The number 2 is the one which came in June 23 because this article came prior to June 23. And number 3 is still open, and number 4 is like the most common way you get a business risk question. So this is the way a business risk is examined always. Now, anything which asks you evaluate, you need to give a conclusion. Conclusions are must for each evaluation. Business risks are not prioritized, right? There is a general misconception of student that we even need to prioritize the business risk. No, only audit risk and ROM is to be prioritized as guided in the previous session. Business risk is not prioritized. So you will just be writing the business risk in any order. But yes, each one of them should be a significant business risk. That's very important, right? So that's the 4 possible ways. Please ensure you are brushing over this article in terms of how a question number 1 for 50 marks is set in, because it's also telling you the technical and professional marks in question number 1 and what other things can come in question number 1 beside risk. There are procedures and ethical issues or methods in accepting a new client, something like that is part of the question number 1. So that's all what is being guided by the examiner in this. But I was just specifically looking at this article for the major chunk, which was about the different types of approaches the examining team can take in for building a question around risk. So I hope this session would largely benefit you ahead of your upcoming exams and the future exams as well. So this is your tutor, Kashif Kamran, signing off from possible ways in which risk question could be set in the future exams for AAA. Take good care of yourself, study effectively. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.